My name is Richard S. Thain, and I was born in 1845. My parents immigrated, so I was born after they had just arrived in the United States. My parents and older siblings were all born in Aberdeenshire, Scotland, and came over here and moved to just outside the Rockford area. In 1862, the Union Army was not doing too well. It had been fighting for a year already, and most of their battles were pretty catastrophic losses. Lincoln asked for more volunteers. So my brother, Alexander Thain, as well as myself and many others from our county of Lake County, decided that we were going to volunteer. My brother was 22. I was 18 on paper. I was 17 at the time, so I lied about my age to enlist. And we were mustered into service in Rockford, Illinois, as Company D of the 96th Illinois Volunteer Infantry. We were then taken on trains down to Cairo, put on steamers, and sent down the Mississippi River, and participated in some of the hardest fighting during the war. We participated in battles all the way through Tennessee, into Mississippi, and all the way to Atlanta. Just outside of Atlanta at Chickamauga on the Tennessee-Georgia border, I had my shoes shot off and my canteen was hit several times. At Kennesaw Mountain outside of Atlanta, my brother Alexander was shot in the leg, and I myself received a wound in the leg at Mission Ridge just outside of Atlanta. After my wounding, I got transferred to the Postmaster's Department. And the war dragged on. We finished the war in 1865. The regiment marched over 202,000 miles in its term of service, and it lost over 50% of their men. Upon returning back to Illinois, we were mustered out, where we returned home, and I married my wife Emma, and we made our home in Oak Park on Home Avenue. Once there, we lived rather lengthy lives and lived to a old age, and that was about that. Our uniforms are standard wool. These are all wool. Right now I am wearing 3 layers. That would be 2 layers of wool and then a cotton shirt, and that would apply to all of us. Shoes, leather brogans. Our hats are Western style hats. Being farmers when we immigrated here, a lot of people out here realized that your wider brimmed hats were more useful, kept the sun off your face, kept it off your neck. Some of the other styles of headwear were not deemed very practical by the Westerners, because we spent most of our time out in the sun versus a lot of the city boys that just weren't very active out in the fields. Other items would have been, of course, the tool of the trade. This is what we were there for. So this is an average. This is your Enfield 1853 model, imported from London, England. It's a muzzle loader, so it works just like your old flintlocks and other weapons that were used at the time. Your cartridge box that held your ammunition. Your cap pouch that was involved in discharging your weapon, which was a new concept at the time. And of course, your triangular socket bayonet. Occasionally was used in combat, but found more productive uses off the battlefield. Other Army items would have been our pup tent, which 2 soldiers would have carried and would have set up. More commonly though, we spent more of our time sleeping on the ground with just a blanket. Hence the blanket roll. There were 2 ways of carrying all your gear. One was in a knapsack, and the other was a blanket roll where you threw some shirts, some socks, some personal items, rolled it up, slung it over, and that way I could carry it, throw it off if I needed to, and was the preferred method by most Illinois soldiers. Many found the knapsacks to be very cumbersome, and you really didn't need them. Other items would be my greatcoat, which would have been issued to me when I enlisted. If we enlisted in April, or when we joined up, which was more like August, why would you want a winter coat towards the end of summer? Well, most soldiers threw them away. By October, they realized that they probably should have kept them. And a lot of times they could tell where the army had been by the trail of greatcoats that were being tossed at the side of the road, since soldiers didn't think they needed them. But you also got docked part of your pay for losing your greatcoats. Other items would be more personal items that I would have carried in my haversack. Anything from spare rounds of ammunition to things like Bibles, journals. I have a sewing kit that, ironically, the nickname was, it's called a housewife. I have a tintype, just a photograph, letters, cards, any number of camp hat. So a lot of soldiers would get personal things from home or buy what they needed that would have been a little bit more for their own personal care, combs, anything like that. The most important item that we have is our battle flag, and that would have been given to Richard's regiment, to any regiment that was mustered into the Union Army. And these items were not just a piece of fabric. They were often handmade by a local society, by the local ladies, for the regiment that was being formed. And these were not strangers. These were people that were well known in the community. People knew each other. So these were tokens that were being made, or if they were made by a company, Gibbard and Hubbard, which was a company in Chicago, was one of the largest manufacturers of flags during the Civil War. But even if a town had purchased one, giving it to a regiment meant a lot more than just handing them a piece of fabric. During the war, regiments would write on their battle honors to keep a record of which battles they had served in. And to lose one in battle was very disheartening to a regiment because it was something that was quite special to them. So that was probably one of the most important things that a regiment would have. These are rifled. These shoot a conical round that I could hit a target at about 500 yards if I wasn't under any form of pressure. 300, it would be about a guarantee that I would hit my target, even if I was under a slight amount of pressure. Most of the battles that were being fought, Gettysburg, Vicksburg, you name it, were being fought at a range of about 200 yards or closer. These weapons were not meant to be used at 200 yards. You pull the trigger with one of these, you're going to hit more than just what your intended target is. And that's why partly the casualty rates are so high for it, is these weapons were about 10 years ahead of the tactics that they were still being used on the battlefield.
58 caliber?
Does it take to reload?
58.
Okay.
The only larger weapon we have that was used was a 69 caliber in 1842 Springfield. And currently today in the U.S. arsenal, we do not have a weapon that is larger than a 50 caliber. So these are larger than any weapon we currently hold. You first take your round out. They're about, you can hold one. You can find out for yourself. They're about 13 pounds.
That's close.
Yeah, they're about
If
13
you carry
pounds.
it all day, it gets heavier.
And to load one, you would take your round out, which would include the mini ball. You would tear the cartridge. You would then charge the cartridge down the barrel. Then you would seat the rounds by pressing the thumb, pressing the round down. You would draw out the rammer. And meanwhile, this is all being done under fire. So for many of these men, even if they were expert marksmen, the only difference in this scenario is that their squirrels or whatever they were shooting were not shooting back at you. Your last step that was the modern concept is now you have a percussion system that is unlike your flintlocks. The rifles are more reliable. If they get wet, chances are they will probably fire better, or at least they'll fire at all. And the last step is to prime your weapon, and then you would just shoot your round off. That's just one rifle. It times that by another 1,000 rifles plus. Your regiment alone, 800 men. Your entire battlefield, 20, 30,000. So the amount of rifle fire, and for both of us, we have been to anniversary events where we have seen in excess of 10,000 men. And when you hear that on the battlefield, you have a very good appreciation for what the battlefield looked like, sounded like, and it's an unreal type of experience.